Hey everybody, this is Perch. Now, this is going to be a pretty dry topic, I suspect for most of you, but I'm going to do my best to make it as exciting as possible because this is a really easy thing to understand. If you could just get the basics kind of locked down, it's going to be super helpful to you. So basically, what I'm going to do is talk about understanding the market, and I'm going to use a very simple principle that if you have ever worked for a startup or raised money or done any kind of market analysis, you're immediately going to know the terms that I'm about to show you. They apply to everything. What's strange is that many people in comics choose to ignore them to their detriment. It helps frame up everything in the comic industry if you get it. So basically, it's this. You may have seen this chart before. It's the TAM, the SAM, and the SOM. Or, not in nerdy ways, the total available market, the serviceable available market, and the serviceable obtainable market. Now, why does this matter? Well, in these classifications, it helps you basically set and gauge what's going on in comics. And especially if you're about to enter into comics or work within comics, an understanding of this is super helpful. You can think about it this way. The TAM is like that giant long-legged enchantress that Rob Liefeld drew back during the Avengers run. I just like to put that there. I'm trying to just keep your attention somehow. The enchantress is a good way to do it. The SAM is a serviceable available market. It's a little bit more realistic. It's what basically you think you can obtain. And then the serviceable obtainable market is where you actually want to play. So in terms of enchantress from giant legs to plastic toy, this gives you just a good visual to kind of keep in your mind as we go about this. Let's talk about the TAM really quick. The TAM, or the total available market, it's a sum of all revenue. It's important to note here we're saying revenue. We're not saying profit. It's worldwide for the entire industry. If there was no competition at all and your product was able to be sold everywhere, worldwide at every possible location, that's the total available market. And if everyone who had an interest in the total market was a potential consumer for your product, this would be how you look at things. Now, there is no way that this is ever going to be you. But a lot of people get tricked and make a lot of mistakes into thinking the TAM applies to them. The TAM is about understanding, not about what you're able to do there. When we talk about the comics industry, the TAM is selling what? Comic books, graphic novels, trade paperbacks, merchandise, everything associated with comics. And where is it selling it? Basically everywhere. Every country, every store, direct to consumer, physical, digital, everywhere. And who is buying it? Pretty much anyone who can read. Every demographic, every age, every gender, every language, everything. And who are you competing against at total TAM? Nobody. There's really not the concept of competing against. To put in another analogy for this is if you're thinking about food, your TAM would be the worldwide food market, everywhere where people eat food or sell food, basically everyone. Anyone who's going to spend money on food, that's your total available market. Now for comics, we have some projections. There's been some Gartner analysis and other places that say the global comic book market, comic book being everything I mentioned above, probably minus the licensing, but everything in terms of printed graphic novel content or digital content or anything that remotely falls into comic books is projected to reach 4.686 billion over the next 5 years. That's yearly. It's going to be yearly bringing in 4.686 billion. Now here's an interesting little stat to bring down. Geographically, the largest market, it's true today and it's actually widening, is Asia Pacific. That took up almost half, about 41.26% of the global market in 2019 was made up of Asia, whereas North America came in second, Europe third. Mainly it's because Europe produces a lot less content overall. I'm not going to go down this path today, but basically North America is producing a lot more than Europe. But if you think about dollars per units, Europe tends to be a little bit more healthy. And then you have South America, which is a rapidly growing market. It was much smaller 10 years ago, and really there's not a lot of activity going on in Australia or in Africa to really speak of, and certainly there's no Antarctica publishers going on. I'm not talking Antarctic Press. I'm talking about the continent here. But Asia Pacific is where it's at. The other thing is the key players that we talk about who are playing in this total available market kind of fall into these people. Shueisha is obviously a really big one, but you'll notice a lot of names on this screen you may not have heard of. And it's important when we're talking about the total available market. We're not talking about Marvel or DC. We're talking about the Walt Disney Company. We're talking about here Warner Brothers. Probably this should be updated to say AT&T at this point. But this is who we're talking about. We're talking about places like Comixology, which is a vendor. We're talking about Webtoon, which is Naver. We're talking about Kickstarter. We're talking about Indiegogo. We're talking about all these places where this people playing in this total available market to create revenue. All right, so that's the TAM. And we'll talk more about why it matters to understand the bigger picture later, but now here's where things get more interesting. The SAM is a serviceable available market. Now this is where it relates to you. The serviceable market is the sum of the market you can reasonably reach with your product. You're a publisher, you're starting out making comics, you know you're not going to be selling them over in Austria or the Netherlands or Korea. You're going to be selling them in the US. That's your market. If there was no competition at all, where still this is just you, this is the market you can reach with your capabilities, where you are today, where your distribution can conceivably reach. And if everyone your product appealed to purchased what you make within your capabilities to service it. So we break down this way. Okay, let's say, we're kind of saying we're coming into the comics. We're a brand new publisher here in the US. We're going to produce comic books, graphic novels, trade paperbacks. We don't really have licensing to speak of. We're new. There is no licensing business for us right now. And basically, where are we going to sell? Well, we're going to sell wherever Diamond distributes, and we're going to sell in Comixology. Every time you add names to this list, your market gets smaller, but that's good. We're trying to really narrow in on where we can sell. We're selling to current Western comic readers, collectors, speculators, and we are going to be competing against some people, but we're not factoring that in yet. But we know the other people playing in this industry are folks like Marvel, DC, Image, Boom, Dark Horse, etc. Okay, so now if we're this North American publisher starting up, we can say the North American comic book market size is projected to reach $1.328 billion by 2026. All right. Monthly comics through Diamond is projected to reach 402 million by 2026. Now, again, this is monthly floppies in our business. All right. Okay, so all good here. We're generally sizing our way down. So here's where this last category, and this is where if you're raising money or if you're trying to figure out how much revenue you can look to basically collect, this is where you need to understand your serviceable, obtainable market. And this is basically the sum of the market you can reach with your product, factoring in competition. And assuming a competition, where do you play? Are you more like Marvel? Are you more like Mad Cave Studios? Which one are you more like? Where are you going to be competing and how are you going to get it done, given your product, the marketing you can apply, your distribution, and your partnerships? Where can you play? So now we're really narrowing it down. We're a new publisher. We're going to be selling comic books. We don't really have content for trades. We can do some graphic novels, but we don't have that content yet. We're still going to try to distribute through Diamond and through Comixology. And we're going to appeal to Western comic readers, indie comic fans. We're going to do sci-fi, horror, slice of life type things. And if we're in that category, we're really, we're going to be competing against places like Mad Cave, Aftershock, and Vault. Now, here's what's interesting. When you're calculating your serviceable obtainable market, you're not really going to exceed, you shouldn't plan to exceed 20% of the total value of the SAM within the first 2 years of publishing. And this is where figuring out your competition and where you're playing really matters. If you are able to immediately compete with Marvel and DC, meaning you're going to be producing 60 to 80 comics right out the gate monthly, and you're going to have the same distribution, you're going to have the same marketing capabilities, the same money going to all that, then reasonably, you might be able to obtain $70 million of yearly revenue after 2 years, right? You're coming in new to the market, but you're throwing all the same money Marvel and DC are. That's what you could obtain. Now, chances are you don't have that kind of money, so that's an unrealistic target. So if we look at it, basically this is where we start to calculate out where people are. If you're looking to be more realistic, here's the current market share of indie companies, looking back at kind of the 2019 numbers we did a while ago. Here's how they all chart out. Marvel and DC, yes, I understand that Marvel being blue and DC being orange is weird. I'm updating my colors, but haven't gotten to it yet. But bringing this up bigger, this is what it currently looks like in terms of the market share. If you're like most of the indies, and you can estimate you're between 4 and 2% of the market, that's where you're going to play. That means a more reasonable SOM yearly revenue target after 2 years might be around 3.2 million in revenue. So yearly revenue before expenses, 3.2 billion if you compete and you do it well and you're able to play at that 2 to 4% of the market. Okay? Now, if you're doing, I want to stop at this point. If you're doing real business analysis, you need to take more time than a quick 10-minute video. But this is a back of the napkin fast way to do it. If you go out to lunch with somebody, I've done it many times, we're like, let's calculate your business. This is called back of the napkin or t-shirt sizing. This is getting as close as possible in a very small amount of time so you can just understand what you're playing with. When you get good at understanding the TAM, the SAM, and the SOM, then you can do this relatively quickly. You can get to understanding your market within an hours of research at a very, very high level. Not enough to go raise money, not enough to be perfect, but certainly enough to get a good understanding of where you're playing. So here's the last bit of information. To really understand your serviceable, obtainable market, you have to be very honest with yourself. No pipe dreams, no craziness, just what's really happening with you. And this is a question that you should answer. Who's buying your product? Where do they buy it? And how quickly do they buy it? These data points are really important. So what kind of customer? Your age, gender, education, interest? Who does your comic, your product appeal to? And where are they buying it? Do they go directly to you? Are they going to a comic shop? Are they buying online? Where are they able to get it? And how quickly do they buy it? This last one is increasingly important, and it may not seem immediately obvious to why, but basically you need to understand, are people buying it on day one, or do you have a trailing audience? Because your buildup of revenue over time is going to matter. Does 90% of your cash come on day one? Or are you able to stretch out your cash where when you put, the more product you put out into the market, the higher overall cushion of basically revenue is going to be. So this is just an example. Don't get weird, people, please. This is just a literary example of darts on the board. Looking at Mad Cave, Antarctic Press, and I think this is what Richard Meyer's brand these days is with the Splato comics. I'm sure I do not have the right logo. This was a 2-minute quick round trip to YouTube to grab a logo. Probably wrong. I apologize if it is. But here's how these three companies are different. Who buys the Mad Cave product? Customers of indie project comics, genre-driven storytelling, short-form limited series, OGNs. That's who they're appealing to. Antarctic is going to be a little bit more of political parody-based comics, pop culture trends, some ongoing manga-influenced curated brands. That's going to be their kind of thing. And in the Splato example, it's customers wanting something outside of what traditional print publishers are offering, more action-based storytelling. Thought about putting here more throwback to stuff from the 80s, 90s type storytelling feel. Don't know if that's fair. I don't think retro applies there, but basically an audience who's not being serviced by the current print market today. I think that's fair. So where do they buy it? So Mad Cave, you can buy it through comic shops, through Diamond, Comixology. It looks like there's some direct through website. Antarctic is very similar. Again, you have Diamond, I think you have Comixology there. You have some direct from the creators, so the creators are able to kind of push their own wares. And then in the last example, direct from the creator via, in this case, Indiegogo. Now, how quickly do they buy it? So Mad Cave, typically the same month of delivery. They're pretty much an immediate sale. There's some trailing, but most of their revenue is coming from there. This is, by the way, my guess. Somebody could show me their books and I'd be quite surprised, but my guess is typically same month of delivery. Antarctic is mixed. There's some same month, but then they also do what looks like a healthier trade and back issue business, and they keep things going. And then finally, in the Splato example, this is all based on Indiegogo timing and delivery. Typically, and I don't know if it applies to him or not, but they are front and back loaded to the campaign term, meaning when the campaign starts, people fund, and when the campaign's about to end, people fund, and there's very little in the middle, or less activity in the middle. It tends to be front-loaded or back-loaded. That's how a lot of the campaigns work. So understanding all that understands a little bit about how to factor your business. If we go back to this TAM, SAM, SOM example, understanding the TAM is about understanding the market. Understanding the SAM is about knowing the potential of that market, and understanding the SOM is about knowing your market. Or put another way, understanding the market is learning from what other people are doing and predict what is happening, understanding which trends apply to you and which do not. Understanding the potential is important because if you're to succeed and grow, this is your upside. This is your potential opportunity. This is what, if you're going to an investor, you want to sell them on the growth of your business. And finally, understanding your market is about realistically understanding what you're going to get, what it's going to take to succeed, what you're going to need to cover your costs, what you're going to be able to promise people as certainties. I mean, overall, again, this may sound like a very bunch of boring accounting stuff, but knowing the market at a high level is easy. Once you kind of get into this, you can pull data relatively quickly. You can understand these three categories, and it helps understand why people are doing some of what they're doing, why Marvel's playing where they are. For example, Marvel's looking at this and seeing that the total available market is growing faster and quicker than they are. That's because it's starting to insert things around YA and manga and these other industries are starting to get wedged into there. So Marvel, in order to grow, wants to start to tap into that total available market that they're not reaching today. It helps explain some of their moves. This also explains some of what DC is doing. This explains what some of the indies are doing and how they're playing the game. It's helpful. Even if you're a customer, it's a little bit of peace of mind knowing why these people are doing what they're doing. If you're a creator, it really helps to understand some of this because it knows how you can perhaps refine some of your pitch to appeal to that total available market. Especially if you can line up something you're trying to do, like a comic you want to produce or an idea that you have, if you could tweak it a little bit so it fits into some things that are trending in that total available market, then when you go in to sell your comic or do your pitch, you basically tell them, hey, I'm not just bringing you a comic, I'm bringing you a potential to grow your business. That's going to be powerful for you. So that's why all this is cool. And yes, you can stare at the Enchantress's legs as well. They're huge. It sounds like nerdy stuff. It's really not. It gets to be kind of fun once you kind of understand what's going on and put some logic into the industry. Now, I just want to be honest here. I've talked to a lot of people, and it's never bad when fans or creators have never heard of these terms. That's not surprising. And don't feel bad if you never have. It's okay. It's not. Nobody's pushing you. Nobody is saying any of this. I'm always a little bit more irritated, I guess, when an editor doesn't know these terms, because this is all about product placement. And then I've been a big eye roll to some executives. I remember there was some interview where Dan Didio was asked about some of this stuff, and he's like, I don't know what that means. And it's like, that's somebody who should know. that's where it's like, okay, this is business school 101 stuff. You should know this kind of thing. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. I hope it was educational. I hope it wasn't too nerdy for you. I think it just helps. The more we know, what's that G.I. Joe saying? The more you know, knowing is half the battle. No, that's NBC. I've merged NBC's dumb tagline with G.I. Joe. I am embarrassed now. Anyway, let me know what your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe. You can ask me questions, follow me on social media, all that kind of stuff. The description's in the video. So the description of the video has that information. That's what I mean to say. Thank you for listening.